What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. So today, Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 officially releases, but the other day we found out a bit more information around the physical release for the game that really shows how unnecessary and ridiculous the whole thing is, which also once again leans into that all-digital future. We'll go over that here today. Also, we are going to be talking about Microsoft, Xbox, and Game Pass, as in a recent filing shows a pretty big miss for the overall platform and subscription this year. And we'll also be talking about PlayStation's London studios as they're ready to talk about what's next with their big project. Guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure you hit that like button, helps out a ton. And if you're new here to the Spawnwave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. And we're gonna start today with the Callisto protocol. It's coming up here at the beginning of December, and I'm excited for it. It's looked good every single showing they've had, and in fact, it's just gotten better and better as they've been showing this game off. But in one territory, it looks like the game's not even going to release. We can see this posted up by the Callisto protocol, but then followed up here by Dr. Sirkin Toto. Says the Callisto protocol's release is canceled in Japan. Local ratings agency Sero did not like the level of violence in the game, and the developer refuses to comply with their demands. Many people don't know a lot of games are censored in Japan. I do remember that Resident Evil 2 Remake was censored with some of the violence and the gore in the game, and if you've seen Callisto Protocol, yeah, it's not exactly sunshine and rainbows in that game. And if they were requested to change or alter scenes, they say no, well, in that case, it's just not releasing in that region, and that appears to be the case here. So unfortunate, obviously, for Japan and people who wanted to pick it up there and play it. Looks like you may have to look outside of Japan to get a copy, and fortunately, systems like the PlayStation 5 are region-free. Also, heading into 2023, Microsoft is testing out a new Xbox dashboard update that changes the way it looks somewhat. There have been requests to kind of shrink down and more or less introduce a more minimalistic approach for it, rather than just boxes and advertising all over the place. But looks like they're going in the complete opposite direction. You can see this posted up by Jez Corden. Says the new Xbox dashboard on the alpha skip ahead basically looks like a mirror of the Game Pass app for TVs. And he's scrolling through it here. I can't really disagree. It does look like they're trying to bring everything together with that sort of look. But while it may work fine on the TV setting, I think on the Xbox, most people are looking for something like this mock-up for the Xbox, like Clobrel shared here, basically shrinking down the boxes so you can see, you know, those dynamic backgrounds that they have been introducing, because obviously if you set that up, you'd like to at least see it when you turn your system on. Even though I know that's aesthetics and not necessarily functional, it's still cool to have that. In this case, though, it's just boxes all over the place and advertising for free-to-play games. Got to get that engagement up. Oh, and while we talked about Phil Spencer's overall presentation during that Wall Street Journal conference, there was something else in there about Call of Duty and other platforms and how they're going to treat it. We can see this posted up by Nintendo Life, where he says, we'd like to bring it to Nintendo devices. We'd like to bring the other popular titles that Activision has and ensure that they continue to be available on PlayStation and that they become available on Nintendo. In fact, he says they would like to treat Call of Duty like they treat Minecraft, which is that it's supported on all different platforms and they're consistently updated going forward. And sure, the part of this is that him obviously posturing to the CMA and other regulators, like, hey, we're not going to be removing Call of Duty. We want to continue its overall growth and even work to bring it to platforms where it's not available, like the Switch. I'd be curious to see them attempt that, just to find out exactly how Call of Duty would one, function on the Switch, and two, just perform overall with the audience there now. But there you have it. It looks like Call of Duty isn't going anywhere, being pulled from any platforms, and instead will follow the same kind of path of Minecraft. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2. It's out today. I've already played through the campaign because there was like early access for it. Activision sent over a code so I could check it out. And the campaign, for the most part, I thought was enjoyable for what it was. It definitely wasn't the best campaign for Call of Duty, but I don't think it was the worst either. It was kind of just right in there, I'd say safely in the middle, and certainly helps to prepare for the multiplayer that started today. And it looks like we got to look at the physical copy of Call of Duty. Of course, you can buy it on your PS5 and your Xbox Series at the store. Turns out that when you get home and you pop that disc in, you're still going to be downloading hundreds of gigabytes of data because there's really nothing on the disk. Take a look here. This posted up by Does It Play with an Image. you can see of Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, this on the main page after you would go to install the game. It'll, of course, tell you how much space it's taking up on your M.2 drive, and 72.23 megabytes. That Kraken compression is really coming through here. No, the obvious thing is basically the only part of that disk that's really the game is basically a key that then lets you download the game from a server, so authentication. And technically, it's better than a one-time use code because the disk itself has that code on there and can then go between consoles, so it's not locked to your overall account. But on the other hand, what was the point of this? And I'm also curious if it's on a Blu-ray disc. If you bought this game physically, let me know down in the comments if it is, because wow, what a waste. You could have put this on, well, you can't put it on a CD because apparently the PS5 can't read CDs, but you could have put it on a DVD and still wasted an obscene amount of space, 4.5 gigabytes still. So it's a strange thing to see this, but on the other hand, with the way the entire industry is trending and what these publishers want, it makes perfect sense. They don't want to have to make these games physically anymore if they can help it. The distribution, even them trying to predict how many copies have to go out and talking with distributors, all these different things. There's a lot that happens behind the scenes that significantly cuts into their profit margin. If they could have it their way, it would be completely digital, no physical copies, and they would take the 70% and roll along to the next release. So here we have a release that doesn't make a lot of sense to exist in the first place, outside of, again, be able to trade it in and sell it and just basically have an authentication key on a disc. And maybe now you go, well, what was the point of this at all? And they say, well, you're right. I guess we have no choice. We have to go to an all-digital future. I saw people wondering, oh, isn't this just how all these discs operate anyway? No, on the PS5, believe it or not, a majority of them, you pop in, it installs, and you can play it. I wouldn't be shocked if there are more Switch games that you have to download stuff to actually play the game as a necessity, because we've seen so many publishers break the game into pieces, and there's a little bit on the cartridge, you can download the rest. Then on the PS5, where you just pop the game, and for the most part, you can install completely. The Xbox was a strange one because of smart delivery, so they would have to download a bunch of files if you had, say, a Series X or a Series S. But even that situation is kind of going away as it's being moved to just Xbox Series systems, as MVG displayed in a video where you can play completely off of the disc, of course, after installs. As for the file size of Call of Duty, which was another thing that was brought up, I believe they could have just put the campaign on the disc. Remember, these are like the Ultra HD Blu-ray discs that hold up to 100 gigabytes on the PlayStation 5. Put the campaign on there, and if you want to play multiplayer, then you download that part. It just seems very odd that nothing is on the disc at all. So I will see going forward if this becomes a trend where you pop the disc in and it really just installs 100 megabytes, and then you got to start downloading the other 100 gigabytes for a game. And how much longer until you don't even get a disc at all? Again, I believe this is the last generation where you have a disk drive of any kind on your system, and the PS6 and the Xbox Series XX or something, or XL, it'll probably just be all digital, and that'll be it. You know what? I think I will do another video around this entire thing, because there's more information just outside of this Call of Duty disc that tells me it might even be before the end of this generation that you stop seeing physical discs show up in stores. Next up, let's talk about the Famitsu sales charts, as this gives us our first look as to how Persona 5 Royal did on the Switch. We'll head over here to the top 10, starting with Splatoon 3, which continues to top the sales charts, 66,000 copies, now over 3.1 million sold, again, physically in Japan. So impressive stuff there for Splatoon 3. Then we have Persona 5 Royal on the Switch coming in at number 2, 45,998. That's a pretty good opening for a game that's been out for quite a while now. And then we have Monster Rancher, interesting, 24,069, Gran Turismo 7, Dragon Quest X, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, Minecraft, Nier Automata on the Switch there, Persona 5 Royal on the PlayStation 5. This game has released multiple times on the PlayStation system, but still 5,000 copies. And then we have Dragon Quest X All-in-One Package version 1, through 6 to close out the top 10. Moving over to the hardware, Nintendo Switch at the top, 54,637, bringing its lifetime over 26.5 million units sold. It is down about 600,000 units, though, from last year to date, so we'll see if Pokemon can give it a bit of a spike heading into the holiday season. Then the PS5 below that, 28,661, crossing the 2 million mark, but I believe, looking around, this is the longest it's taken a PlayStation console in Japan to cross that mark. Then we have the Xbox Series, 4,158, the 3DS at 57, and then it looks like people found about 13 PS4s in the back. But overall, I would say it's a pretty good opening for Persona 5 Royal in Japan, specifically on the Switch, and I do wonder if Atlus and Sega are kind of getting the message here, the big picture that, wow, Persona would probably sell really well as a multi-platform release, especially if it's brand new. Persona 6, it's on Nintendo's platform, it's on Sony's platform and Xbox, and especially on PC, that Persona in general has done pretty well there with Persona 4 Gold and seemingly kickstarting this entire initiative to bring all these different Persona games to different platforms. So I guess we're gonna find out going forward. I'm thinking next year when we see Persona 6 get revealed for the first time, exactly how many systems it's heading to. Next up, let's talk about Xbox Game Pass and a bit of a miss for the overall growth trajectory for the subscription service, which, by the way, is tied into parts of Satya Nadella, who's the CEO of Microsoft's his pay. So makes a lot of sense why there is a big time push right now for things like Activision Blizzard to bring them on board and the big push for Game Pass itself. But we can see this reported by Axios, where they say Microsoft targeted a 73% growth rate for Game Pass for its fiscal year ending June 30th, 2022, as part of performance incentives for Nadella and other top executives. But the service only achieved 28% growth, which, as pointed out here, that's 2 misses in a row. The company also failed to hit the executive pay Game Pass target last year after exceeding it in 2020. They really haven't told us much about how many people are subscribed to Game Pass. The last time we heard any kind of number was, I believe, the beginning of this year in January, 25 million. So just based on some of the estimated growth, I'm thinking they're approaching 30 million now. And let's face it, they kind of need some big time first-party AAA games to work to push the service forward. Even like something like Halo Infinite, if you want to play the multiplayer, you don't need Game Pass. You don't need an Xbox Live Gold. It's free to play. You just download it, you start playing, and you can jump in with your friends there, even if they have Game Pass and Xbox Live and all these other things. They need something like Starfield, Redfall, Forza, or any other slew of games that are currently in the works. I know there's like Everwild, and there's Perfect Dark, and there's Fable, but they have so many studios now that next year, they could have a massive blowout and just start showing off game after game after game, and then they're off to the races with their overall growth for Game Pass. And I think right now, they're more or less biding their time and working up to 2023 so they can have some big quality releases, which is one thing that's been pushed around for Game Pass, is that games go to the service and they're not the highest quality. Well, Microsoft delayed Redfall and they delayed Starfield out of this year when their pay is tied directly to Game Pass growth. You figure, well, we can push these names out there and it'll at least help and that'll tie into our bonuses. Instead, I think they are looking long term, like we're talking 15 to 20 years on this one, and it's better to keep the game under development to make sure it is a quality release when it comes out to get even a better push in subscriptions. And that, I think, is the strategy, and it's one of the reasons I'm looking forward to 2023 for Microsoft, because I think it's gonna be a big year for them. So while this is a big miss, obviously, I think it's something that people will forget about as we get into the next year or two and we start seeing those releases get out there, and eventually, when that subscriber growth really picks up, I'm sure we'll start hearing about Game Pass numbers all the time. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about PlayStation London Studio and their new game that they're working on. They gave us some details around it in a piece of concept art, but that was kind of it. It's interesting the way that these games are being presented to us right now from Sony, where they have these sit-down interviews, they talk about it a little bit, and that's sort of it, with no gameplay or trailer or anything like that. But we can see this posted up by GamesIndustry.biz saying why PlayStation London Studio is leaving VR to create a fantasy online combat game. Let's take a look at some of the concept art here as we go over this. Definitely an interesting art style, a bit different from some of the more realistic and dramatic games that we'll see coming out of Sony's first party. I'm thinking like The Last of Us or Ghost of Tsushima. But the interesting thing about this, PlayStation London studio is, they're known for, I guess I would say, gimmick releases, SingStar, iToy, Wonderbook. Yeah, they were working in VR recently, of course, but now they are moving over to what appears to be described as a fantasy PvE live service combat game. I'm trying to picture how this is going to work out exactly. They did talk about how they are using their internal engine, that's the Soho engine, and it is being built specifically for the PlayStation 5, and there's a lot they learned from working with VR and other aspects, and even taking inspiration from some other first-party studios like Guerrilla, who made the transition from Killzone over to Horizon Zero Dawn, which, I mean, yeah, a bit different, going from that first-person shooter experience to a large open-world third-person experience. And really, I wish there was a bit more information around this game outside of a piece of concept art and a lot of vague descriptions as to what they're working on and some of their inspirations. It's just kind of the way that this stuff is getting out there now, with Haven Studio having an interview talking about their game, but also their development process. And the only thing I can think of is these live service games are still very early on in development. And like this one, for example, from London Studios, 2025, maybe if all they're showing us is a piece of concept art, at least we can visualize somewhat what this game looks like. But it's gonna be a bit for some of these titles. I mean, if they have 10 of them, some of them probably already been introduced. They still have a run-up of most likely 5 to 6 years before they're all out there. So I guess they want to start planting the seeds now to get us ready for those releases. Really, at this point, Sony just needs to start talking about some sort of showcase, work to set up 2023 and beyond. And before we go to the comment of the day, we're going to take a look at the poll that I posted up yesterday, where I ask, Phil Spencer mentioned the possibility of raising prices somewhere in the Xbox ecosystem. What do you think is the most likely part to go up in price first? 60% said Game Pass subscription. Okay. 26% said the games, 11% the consoles, and then 3% Xbox Live Gold. Hey, they already tried to double Xbox Live Gold's yearly price once before. Who knows? They might try to do it again. I think the games, though, would be the most likely, because Starfield will probably come out as a $70 game, and I assume that's coming out in the next year, whereas I believe Game Pass will probably have its price moved up after they've at least worked through the initial user acquisition phase that will most likely run into mid to late 2024. So in this case, they say, hey, we're just trying to conform to the market conditions and the $70 price that's already been set. And in that case, Starfield comes out, and rather than 60, it's 70, which, by the way, also makes Game Pass look that much more valuable. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day, as you're seeing here. This is from Rager saying, I think GeForce 6000 series was PCIe. I remember my friend bought a Dell with a 6800 in it in late 2004, and when I built my computer in early 2005, I wanted to get a 6800, but Micro Center was out of stock, so I bought two 6600 cards and ran them in SLI. The days of SLI. Now, I think back then, I had to really think about this a little bit because we're going way back then. The 6800, I know the 6600 had an AGP variant. The 6800 might have as well, but this was like when we were first really moving to PCI Express. I had a 6600 GT that I got for Christmas, and I actually bought a motherboard with money I had for my birthday and Christmas and all these different things. And it was the Fatality motherboard. It was like a 1 where the eye should be, and I think it was lined up with esports, but the motherboard was red. So I got that, I got the card. It was still compatible with my AMD CPU, which is like when dual cores were like really getting going. But I remember I went to plug everything in and I didn't have an external power source for the card, because that was the first time they really started doing that. So the next day I had to go and get one of those really shoddy Molex to PCI Express power, and it's been a while since those days. Things have certainly changed, and well, now these cards are getting so much power going through them, they're like melting the plastic. And I guess technically the connectors still kind of shoddy. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here. Today was Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 shipping out a disc that has 70 megabytes on it. How much longer until you think they just stop shipping out a disc at all? And then also, what about Xbox and their Game Pass miss for the year? Do you think 2023 is the year where they really turn things around? Thanks guys for watching. Have a great weekend. I'll see you back here Monday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Time for Newswave.